Are you a man? That's the question you gotta ask yourself. Oh,
I'm a man.
look at these guns. What does that even mean, right? Because today there's a lot of people that are more than happy to tell you what manhood is, what it looks like, and what you gotta do to get it. There's conferences, courses, all sorts of things sold by people to convince men, especially young men, how to become a man just like them. Earn the big bucks, get all the women, and get the fancy dream job.
There's a version of you that never sleeps in, never skips training, never wastes time. There's a version of you who never fails.
Now, most of this would fit in the red-pilled content category or the manosphere, which seems to luckily be dying on YouTube, but I could be wrong. It's not my niche. But the interesting thing is that even Christian influencers and or pastors have been talking about it for quite a long time as well, and even have entire ministries based around it.
Who do you think you are? You are not God. You are just a man. You're not an impressive man.
In fact, a recent clip from Mark Driscoll really brought all of this back up to the surface for a little bit on Twitter before the next whole Twitter fight took over.
But part of the problem with work in Catholicism, especially for men, the leader is the priest. And the priest is committed to poverty and chastity. Just so you know, that's my unbucket list. I don't want to die a broke virgin at the church. In fact, I promise you that's not how I'm going out. Within that, it doesn't bring the healthiest men, and it doesn't encourage and inspire men. Because if the leader is, well, he doesn't have a wife, he doesn't have kids, he doesn't own anything, he's not building anything, and he's not responsible for anyone, it's really hard to admire that guy.
Now, to be fair to Mark, I didn't watch any other part of what he was talking about, just the clip that was posted. So there could be more context, but let's just say that there's not. And the interesting thing about his comment is that he's actually describing Jesus, a broke virgin. And we all follow Jesus if we're believers.
But I came across this clip from a podcast I've never heard of, and at first I thought this is just another red-pilled manosphere bro. But then he said this.
I mean, I heard you say on a recent podcast that once you figured out that you were a servant and that was your primary role, then you can really step into what it means to be a man. So we're supposed to serve our children, our communities, our church, our wife, and we weren't given the strength that we have for our own sake. That's just arrogance, man.
And I think what he says at the very beginning of this clip is actually a very good point.
There's no agreed upon ritual or definition. And so for all of human history until about the last 100 years, there was only two classifications of male. There was boy and there was man. About the last 75 years, we have a new classification. Technically, it's called adolescent. It's just a dude. And a dude is a dangerous thing.
And I think what he says at the beginning of this clip is 100% correct. The American culture does not have any sort of distinguishing line between boy and man. And so we just make it up as we go, saying these are the things that it means to be a man, when they aren't really the things that make men men. And so Christian men are essentially left with two categories to pick from. Either a very effeminate manhood, which says sorry all the time and follows everything around like a sad puppy, or a manhood that is barely Christian and a lot more broosphere. But again, what's described in this podcast clip is actually biblical and can be backed up by the Bible. Christian men are meant to be servants of their family, but not servants in the sense of being the doormat or the rug that everybody walks on, but one that utilizes our strength in such a way that we provide and protect for the family as Christ provides and protects us as the church. And when we begin to understand that, we can see both categories we've been handed, either the effeminate Christianity or the manosphere Christianity, are both counterfeits to what we've actually been called to by God.
In fact, Paul gives us three specific places in which he talks about what it looks like to be a Christian man, which is alluded to in the clip I played. The first is 1 Timothy chapter 6, verse 11. The second is 1 Corinthians chapter 16, verses 13 and 14. And the third is Ephesians chapter 5, specifically verse 25. And all of these speak about being godly men and the characteristics of godly men. In 1 Timothy chapter 6, verse 11, Paul specifically is speaking to Timothy and says, "But as for you, O man of God, flee these things. Pursue righteousness, godliness, faith, love, steadfastness, and gentleness." In 1 Corinthians chapter 16, verse 13, it says, "Watch, stand firm in faith, act like a man, be strong." Now, some people will say act like a man is actually be courageous, but the Greek wording here could be translated act like a man or be courageous because these two things are tied together. Men should be courageous. And then lastly, what the clip was actually talking about is Ephesians chapter 5, verse 25, a verse read at many weddings. And it says this: "Husband, love your wives as Christ loved the church and gave himself up for her, that he might sanctify her, having cleansed her by the washing of the water by the word, so that he might present the church to himself in splendor, without spot or wrinkle or any such thing, that she might be holy and without blemish. In the same way, husbands should love their wives as their own bodies. He who loves his wife loves himself. For no one who ever hated his own flesh, but nourishes it and cherishes it, just as Christ does the church, because we are all members of his body."
And as always, going to the scripture has solved all of our issues again. What it really comes down to is, are we going to listen and obey or not?
Once you figured out that you were a servant and that was your primary role, then you can really step into what it means to be a man.